First, I want to make clear that apartheid has become a technical legal term defined by international instruments, defined in Article 3 of the treaty that created the International Criminal Court and gave it jurisdiction. Of course, when most people think about apartheid, they think about South Africa. And that is correct, because that's where the term started. But different apartheid situations today can have different elements to them, sometimes even worse than South Africa. So the conversation shouldn't be, is this like South Africa or not, but does it fulfill the criteria, the elements of the crime of apartheid, which is today a well-defined legal concept.
So the crime of apartheid, as defined by the International Criminal Court, is what exactly?
Well, it includes basically two elements. The first is a list of abuses, human rights violations, acts of suppression, acts of oppression, which are similar to what happened in South Africa. But the second and probably the more important element is the existence of a legal and administrative system and structure that allows for the oppression of one group by the dominant group. So that the elements that go into that legal system in South Africa used to be the pass law system, used to be the treatment of blacks and coloreds as different from whites. In the West Bank, there are other elements. There is the Hawiya identity card system. There's the A, B, and C categorization. There's different license plates, a different road system, a different court system, a different system of laws, as well as services that apply to you, whether you are a West Bank Palestinian or whether you are a Jewish Israeli.
Just for the sake of argument, if there is a settlement on the West Bank, an Israeli settlement, would I, as a Christian, or would I, as an Arab, be able to buy a house there, go and move into one of the settlements, should I wanted to do that?
Well, the answer is clearly no. These are Jewish settlements. They're not Israeli settlements. And they deliberately and openly are open only for Jews. Even if you're not a citizen of Israel, you're not welcome there and you're not allowed to move there. It's an entire structure that was created to advance a Zionist goal that openly wanted that area to be for Jews. So in a way, they are even more Zionist than the State of Israel itself. The State of Israel sometimes talks about itself as a Jewish state, even though 20% of its citizens are not Jews. But these settlers don't even make that compromise. They are specifically Jewish settlements for Jews.
A lot of people watching will probably be completely unfamiliar with all of this, you see. And I mean, but people also watching will say, well, you look across the world in different parts of the world, it's very often difficult for religious groups to settle and live amongst each other. It would be difficult, for instance, in northern Iraq for for Christians to go back into areas that they'd previously been living in because of ISIL Daesh, and there's an intolerance sometimes that prevents people from living together. But are you saying here, in this case, it's essentially the law that can be used to prevent Arab Muslims or Christian Arabs from living in a Jewish settlement? You can't do that. Is that what you're telling me?
Correct. I think this is what people do not fully understand. That these settlements are not at all Israeli settlements. They are openly Jewish settlements. They like to apply all aspects of privileges that are available to Israeli citizens, but they want to apply them in the West Bank, within the territory of the West Bank, so that the West Bank is no longer one unit that's occupied by Israel, which is its definition under international law. That's why everybody said these settlements are illegal, because they bring a civilian population from Israel into the occupied territories. But what they were missing is that what was being created here is an entire system that's based totally on whether you are Jewish or not. And if you are not Jewish, even if you are a resident of the West Bank, you cannot come into these settlements. You need a special permit. You definitely cannot live there. But even to enter and to work there, you need to have a special permit. And then you have to leave at the end of the day.
In your article for The Link, Jonathan, you talked very briefly about East Jerusalem, but you essentially said that East Jerusalem really is a different matter really for consideration. And what do you mean by that? Isn't a similar situation happening there? Settlements taking place, being built in East Jerusalem, aren't there?
Yes, of course. Under international law, it's very clear that East Jerusalem is part of the occupied territory that was occupied in 1967. And the settlements there are equally illegal as they are in the West Bank. But the law that Israel used, the legal tools and administration it used in East Jerusalem were different from those that it used in the West Bank. And the laws in East Jerusalem were closer to Israeli laws rather than to military law which applied in the West Bank. And therefore it didn't make the same distinctions between Jews and Arabs that were made in the West Bank. So I don't want to say in any way that East Jerusalem was legitimately annexed into Israel, because it wasn't. But for the purposes of the legal analysis of the mechanisms that were used to impose an apartheid regime in the West Bank, these were different mechanisms, and I wanted the readers to look at these mechanisms apart from the politics of the area. Apart from the history of what went on, the situation now in the West Bank is that it is one of clear apartheid. There's two communities living there, one living in privilege and one living under oppression, one living under civilian laws and one living under a different set of laws, military laws. They are subject to different courts, they live in different areas, they travel on different roads, they have different license plates, they have different telephone arrangements, they have different water arrangements. At every level, it is strictly an apartheid regime in the sense that...
Jonathan, can I come back to you on that and say the legal case that you've made in this article or The Link is a very, very powerful one. But you also seem to suggest that a lot of pressure has been put on the Palestinian authorities not to pursue it through the International Criminal Court.
Correct.
Is that true? And if so, why? Why isn't this being pursued?
That is openly true, because I think both Israel and the United States realize that in any kind of neutral legal forum, the facts speak for themselves. The elements of the crime of apartheid exist, and therefore a decision on that issue is almost a foregone conclusion. As lawyers may say, it's a slam dunk. There is no question that the legal situation in the West Bank constitutes the crime of apartheid, and therefore both the United States and Israel have been pressuring the Palestinian Authority openly and publicly, and threatening it with dire consequences if it chooses to go the legal route. On the other hand, ordinary Palestinians and civil society in Palestine has been pressuring the Palestinian Authority, in fact, to move in that direction.
As you know, the United Nations General Assembly passed by overwhelming majority, a resolution last week calling upon the Secretary General, Antonio Guterres, to prepare a report, I think it's due this week, on how the United Nations intends to protect Palestinians in the occupied territories. There's been talk perhaps of some kind of military protection force. I mean, this is something, as we know, that the United States vetoed at the Security Council a week or so before. This has no realistic chance of happening, does it, Jonathan? But at the same time, isn't it? It's important, but tell us why it could be important.
Okay. Under the Charter of the United Nations, real sanctions, including the use of force, including economic sanctions, can only be imposed by the Security Council. And the 5 permanent members, including the United States, have veto power, and the history has been that the US has always used that veto power to prevent concrete action against Israel. Nonetheless, I think it is important that the law be recognized to be the law. People usually think of the law as something that's imposed by the police and by the courts. The reality is that 98% of the time, the law is applied because people agree to it. People drive on the right side of the road, on the left in England, because everybody knows that that is the law. Not because there's a policeman standing at every junction to make sure that you're driving on the correct side of the road.
But also, we don't want to be killed.
Precisely. Every society, including international community, runs according to international law. And law is understood and accepted even when it is not always enforced. The enforcement through the police and the courts comes on the basis of exceptions, of those who violate the law and who have to be brought to justice. So that right now there is a greater and greater acceptance of international law throughout the world, even though a few rogue states get away with, for the time being, violating these laws. Eventually, I think they will be brought to justice. So it is important that we recognize what international law is. What does it prohibit and what does it allow? International law does prohibit the crime of apartheid. International law does prohibit the use of starvation as a weapon in war, even though that's being used in Syria by both sides. International law prohibits the use of chemical weapons, even though a few states still do keep and stockpile these weapons of mass destruction. I think that we need to recognize that despite what looks like a lawlessness in the international sphere, the international community does abide, by and large, by international law. The International Criminal Court does exist.
Tell us what you think the international community needs to be doing.
Well, the international community is faced with a country that openly flaunts law, international law, and is getting away with it because it has a patron that protects it from sanctions under Chapter 7 of the UN Charter. But the international civil society, ordinary people, churches, unions, human rights organizations have been calling for BDS, which are boycotts, sanctions, divestment from corporations that are guilty of participating in these war crimes. And I think eventually the state of Israel cannot survive without the material, political, cultural, scientific, financial, commercial, and sport support of the rest of the world.